Okay. So just a warm welcome to everyone. This is our fourth monthly briefing for IUCN's Commission on Ecosystem Management Urban Specialist Group for the Africa region. And we want to welcome old faces and new faces. This is our first meeting of the year. And I think many people have joined before, but just if you haven't been a part of these meetings, we meet once a month for usually 30 minutes to an hour to discuss urban nature on the African continent throughout cities. And so this is a gathering place for practitioners, students, anyone really interested in creating change and passion for nature in cities here in Africa. So yeah, we have had a few different presentations before from City of Cape Town. Charmaine and Bronwyn are on the call. And then we also had last month an update from the city of Nairobi. And this month we're lucky enough to get Sabelo and Kosi from Durban, South Africa, the eThekwini municipality. So I think we'll wait, probably a few more people will filter in, but Eric had a few opening remarks before we get to Sabelo's presentation.
Yes, in the meantime, because sometimes at the end we rush it a little bit and we kind of miss out. So just very quickly, can everybody just turn on their cameras? Yeah, so we can see everyone's face, we can wave, and we can take a little group picture. Yeah, just here at the beginning, and we might take another one at the end if we have more people. But if we could just do that very quickly, if you could turn on your cameras and you take a quick picture, that would be wonderful. Yeah. Hey, Luther, good to see you. Johannes, Jonathan, Greg, yeah. Can we get some cameras on? All right, perfect. I am going to snap a picture. Are we ready? Yeah? Okay, just give me 1 second. Of course, I gotta figure out what I'm doing. Okay. All right, all the cameras are on. This is excellent. All right, here we go. All right, say urban nature.
Urban nature.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that, first of all, Happy New Year. Yeah, happy great challenge. We're starting the challenge off this year with massive forest fires, in the city of Los Angeles. Yeah. And all kinds of challenges, but great levels of opportunity because we have cities, and particularly cities in Africa, that are dedicated to preserving, regenerating urban nature and protecting biodiversity. It's a challenge, and we want to build a community here where we can support one another, continue to innovate and move processes forward, and to support one another thoroughly. And we need to begin thinking about how we're going to take this monthly briefing into a process where we can have direct exchanges, right? We already know that, the city of Cape Town, the city of Durban, the city of Nairobi, that have already briefed really want to come together somehow. And we need to be thinking about how we can actually do that on the ground. So when we can see the great work that's happening, we can see, like, for instance, Sabelo said, of the presentation of Nairobi, that Nairobi looks like Durban in terms of what they're doing and what the challenges look like, and how they're moving forward, right? We need to then foster how we can create durable linkages, to grow ideas that are happening in one city and into another, understanding that what we're doing here is we're thinking in a transversal way, right? Cities are different, challenges are similar. Some of them are different depending on degrees, but the kind of ideas that are flourishing in the protection space is important and can have resonance across the cities. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So I just wanted to say that before we hand it over to Sabelo. Julie.
Sure. Sorry. Is there anything else you wanted me to add? Alex?
No, I think that's it. Sibella, I think it's over to you.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as I have been introduced, my name is Sabelo Nkosi from Ethekwini Municipality. Yeah, that is the city of Durban. I might just say Eric is quite persistent, but also convincing. That he has managed to get me to speak. Yeah, I think at this first meeting for this year. If you can, yeah, please just allow me to to share my presentation with a couple of thoughts, but also just in terms of what we are doing here in Durban, in the Ethekwini municipality. I know that we've learned from other cities as well, previously. So let me just find my presentation. Oh, there we go. Eric, Julie, if you don't mind, just letting me know if you can see my slides.
Yes, I
Yes.
see them.
Okay, and once I've gone to presentation mode. Right. Is that clear on your side in presentation mode?
Yes. And one colleague is asking you to speak a little louder, if that's possible.
Is it? Okay, right. So apologies, yeah, I do have a bit of a throat issue, but I'll try my best to to speak up. Hopefully that is better.
I can
Okay.
hear you clearly.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm hearing you now. Thanks.
Yeah, super. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thanks for taking your time this afternoon. I think for joining the session, and essentially, I think the title that I will present on is really just planning in a global biodiversity hotspots, and I think that is probably a topic which is similar to other cities, especially like cities like Cape Town. Like I think if there's anything that's ecologically that I might not fully understand, I think you can look at Charmaine as her path and my path. Actually, I think firstly we came across each other about 20 years ago at University of KwaZulu-Natal. Like I was a student and she was she was much senior than I was, and she was my practical demonstrator. I think for some of the life sciences related courses. So yeah, Charmaine, if you don't mind, taking that flag, anything untoward. Yeah, I mean, colleagues, I think that essentially I want to try to get through this. I suppose as much as quickly as I can, but also I think just focusing on the key points, and essentially this is the outline of my presentation, of which I'm also happy for Julie and Eric to essentially to share this. I think with all of you, and I must just say perhaps at the onset, I think as a Ethekwini municipality, I think quite early on, we're quite deliberate about making sure that the kind of work that we do, especially from a biodiversity as well as an environmental perspective, that is actually done within a policy context, but also in that it's informed by legislation. So for an example, primarily our integrated development plan that we have as a municipality, of which most cities in the South African context are required to have what is known as an integrated development plan. And essentially some of this work that we do, or in fact all of this work that we do, it is part of our plan one, which is really, it focuses on building and sustaining the built as well as the natural environment. So essentially, I think as part of our IDP, we've kind of got biodiversity, nature, and environment as kind of basically is one of our first point. And I do think that I think for us as a municipality, I suppose we do understand I suppose importance of nature and biodiversity to human well-being as well. I think also to ensure that there is a sustainable economic development. And so some of the tools that we do use essentially flow out of our national environmental acts, whether that is a biodiversity act or like in terms of some of the tools that we use and some of the policies that we develop for the local level. But I think also where we protect natural areas from a proclamation perspective, where we make use of National Protected Areas Act. But also we do lean quite a lot on the Spatial Planning, Land Use and Management Act. Which is Pluma, which is in South African context, it's our primary land use and spatial planning act, which is actually at the national level. So essentially, because of where we are, I suppose we are taking advantage of the planning function to really advance biodiversity related work within the municipality. So the point is that a lot of this work that we're doing in the municipality, it is in a policy, but also in a legislative context. We do have a biodiversity strategy, which has 8 goals to it, which then I think it requires a number of role players in addition to the municipality as well as other government agencies to act and to do different action around biodiversity. I'm not going to go through just in terms of some of the background to the natural assets within the Ethekwini municipality. I think really the key thing for us is, in fact, I think a lot of information you can read out of there in terms of the richness of the Ethekwini municipality from a biodiversity perspective. I think we are blessed as a municipality to be located in the middle of one of the global biodiversity hotspots, which is Maputo Pondoland urban hotspot. There's another one like in the Cape, which is the city of Cape Town is actually based. So we as a city of Durban, essentially, we sit in the middle of that Maputo Pondoland urban hotspot. And I think that in itself, it presents a number of I think opportunities for us, but also I think it does give us a number of challenges just in terms of what is it, in terms of how we actually act and actually promote biodiversity protection as well as management within the municipal context. We do think that biodiversity matters to people. Just really, I think from some of the ecosystem services flow out of biodiversity and nature, it also just in ensuring human well-being and as well as sustainable development. I think in about 2017, there was a study which was done, commissioned by the World Bank, essentially to look at, I suppose, the total asset value of our natural and semi-natural areas within the municipality. And as you can see on the top right-hand corner, where our natural areas essentially have been estimated to be valued in the order of 47.8 billion, I think, as an asset. And I think it's important that I think as cities that we do need to take, I think, our natural assets essentially as consider them to be assets, but also when we're applying principles just around asset management, how do we also do that from environmental as well as a biodiversity perspective? Just in terms of the estimations which were done as part of the study, just in terms of the annual flows, in terms of ecosystem services, in that those were estimated to be in the region of 4.2 billion per year, as per that World Bank study, and that really comes in a number of ways. It could be for all Mamgobo, really from drawing water, in a rural area, and using that water essentially for household use, or even harvesting things like the Ngema grass, as you can see on the picture, for making things like baskets and crafts for then selling on forward. But from an urban perspective, it appears that especially your property values, in that we have seen in terms of the property values as well as the rates that are payable, in that when you have properties that are adjacent well managed environmental areas, you find that the property values actually increase relatively more than in other areas which might not be adjacent to natural areas, but also which might be adjacent to areas that are not well managed. So it's quite important that in order for us to sustain some of this, that our natural areas are actually should be protected, but also managed, because it does then, I think, at least in the urban context, it does help, I think, the municipalities in terms of accruing, in terms of the rates that are actually payable to the to the municipality. Yeah, I think the with the slide, just given kind of like the urban context of which I think most cities kind of like operate in what we consider to be a low choice planning environment. And I think what we're wanting to show here is some of the vegetation mapping which was done around about 2016, just in terms of what is it that we have still remaining compared to let's say the 1930s. So this was an exercise which was done through analyzing and mapping using some of the aerial images. And what you can see with the picture on the right hand side, in that there has been a shift in terms of ecological transformation of our natural, in terms of our natural areas, in that we only now have about a third of what used to occur naturally within within the Tegoni municipality. We also do understand that some of these areas that are remaining, some of them are fragmented, some of them are degraded, some of them are infested with invasive alien species. So there are kind of like a myriad of issues and challenges that we're dealing with, just like any other cities globally, just around challenges around urbanization and the impacts on ecosystems. Yeah, as I described earlier, just around fragmentation, poor quality, and the like. And you can see also, like, in our context, in that with the vegetation types which have actually been highlighted in red, where it's quite clear, like, based on that exercise that we did with vegetation mapping, that at least in at least 6 ecosystem types, we know that we can no longer meet conservation targets, like, that have been set, like, for us, in order for us to be able to achieve. So if you look at the environment that we're operating within, that's why we are considering it to be what we call is a low choice planning environment, where every piece of vegetation, natural areas, is then quite important, I think, for us in terms of planning as a municipality. Our approach to biodiversity planning, we use a conservation assessment approach, which is a GIS-based tool with a number of inputs, including that vegetation layer, species data, ecosystem services, and the like. And then essentially we put all of that through this process, and then it produces for us what we then is in municipalities open space layer, which is known famously as the Durban Metropolitan Open Space System, which is for short, we call that DMOS. And essentially what that is, it's really, it's a series of interconnected open spaces that fall across a range of ownership, whether those are privately owned or whether some of them are publicly owned, but also where we have about 2/3 of our municipality under the traditional authority, which is known as Ingonyama Trust. And really what the purpose of this plan is to highlight areas that we consider to be environmentally sensitive, but also that is of areas that are conservation worthy. So it includes a number of protected areas, managed areas, which are initiatives of the municipality, but also those which might be, for example, from our conservation provincial conservation agency, which is Zemvelo KZN and Wildlife. Currently, our Durban Metropolitan Open Space System is about 95,000 hectares in size, and our team is currently in the process of essentially updating this, that we can then use to inform, all levels of planning as well as the environmental decision making. I'd like now, Eric, to move on to maybe some of the implementation tools, of which I think that the last point, the text at the bottom of the slide, it's really starting to talk about some of the implementation tools and how we have actually taken these outcomes out of our planning in how we've mainstreamed it within the organization. I think some of our implementation tools that I'd like to focus on, I did mention earlier that we sit under a planning function of the municipality, and essentially we kind of provide that environmental layer. So I think as part of our spatial planning, we've ensured that our open space layer essentially forms a structuring element for our special development framework, which is a tool and instruments which is required as part of the integrated development plan that I mentioned earlier. And all of this is all part of that plan 1 of the IDP. Also, I think we've gone further to that because with the special development framework, it almost gives you like these notional areas, like areas of potential land use, but it's not really quite definitive. Like I think from a land use perspective, but whereas if you drill down into the land use scheme, what we're then done with the open space layer, Eric, is that we're then integrated that into the land use scheme as a controlled area, which means that if there's any proposals that are within or adjacent to our open space plan, then essentially triggers a form of environmental assessment, and then us as a biodiversity management department, then we are then required to provide guidance on that proposal as well as some of the land uses. We have also created what we consider to be environmental zones within our land use scheme, where previously those never really existed previously. For example, we have introduced what is known as environmental conservation zone, which applies on privately owned land, but also we've applied an environmental conservation reserve, which that is applied on state-owned land. But also we've introduced, just in line with the National Environmental Protected Areas Act, a nature reserve zone within our land use scheme. So for an example, where we might have land that we own as a municipality, it's part of our open space plan. If it needs to be managed and to be zoned appropriately, then we will essentially would rezone that land to that specific zone that essentially promotes biodiversity protection at the land use scheme level. I think also just to support that, we do have some, for example, some guidelines that we use. For example, we have a development assessment guideline that really, I think, just guides, I think, decision making. But also just how we use open space layer is really the prioritization of biodiversity action, whether that's being our biodiversity stewardship policy, where we implement it, but also where we undertake land acquisition for environmental protection. Charmaine, you can see that picture on the top right. That's infamous Giba Gorge that we're talking about, which is a special waiting area. Again, it's the first environmentally based one, where some of them in the urban context really deal with issues around parking, security, like waste management, and this is really, I think, the first pilot within the city that is an environmentally based sort of layer, where we work with adjacent landowners to basically where we've created an NPO that then co-manages this land together with us as a municipality. We also use the open space layer, I think, just to guide us from where we implement some of the large scale programs. There's just some of the information, some of the the budgets and the stats over the last couple of years of where we have then through our layer, but also through our investment on nature, where we have created jobs, we've provided training opportunities for members of the community, like where they might actually where we might have biodiversity priorities. I think, advocacy and communication, we do have a number of platforms with regular states of biodiversity reporting. We have a quarterly biodiversity forum with a range of our stakeholders. We also think that as a municipality on our own, we cannot achieve, I think, some of the biodiversity targets, I think, without actually creating conservation partnerships. I think just in conclusion, just some of the concluding remarks, I've mentioned that we are essentially at the center of a global biodiversity hotspot. For us, we have developed a biodiversity strategy that guides the work that we do. Those goals we may have different priorities in terms of those goals that at different stages of the organization, but also the work that we do, it is informed and is guided by policy, but also legislation, and that there is alignment, in all of that. As I mentioned that, our planning context is we think that it is a low choice planning context where the options that we have are quite limited. Also, I cannot, Eric, I think, overemphasize this point. I think just around the importance of actually having champions. I think without the leadership of, for example, Professor Deborah Roberts, of which some of this work that we're doing, we're essentially continuing on kind of like the foundations and the platform that people like her and some of the others who have been in this organization, who are currently in this organization, to really, I think, just champion biodiversity at all levels of the organization, but also even out there. we're wanting to get quite deliberate on, because we cannot move forward as a municipality alone, I think, without, or if we leave our communities behind. And so we really are wanting to connect, I think, reconnect people with nature and create, I think, those linkages so that people can then start to see the value, like, of biodiversity, where it's not just a scientific or technical thing. As I mentioned, that, yeah, we think that, yeah, conservation partnerships are important, like, if we are to essentially achieve some of the biodiversity targets that have been set before us. I think with that, thank you for, yeah, the invitation, and I think, yeah, for all of you for being here and actually for listening.
Thank you so much, Sabelo. That was fantastic. I think a lot of food for thought. And just to kind of give a frame for the rest of the structure of our time, we have about half an hour left of our hour. So I'd say let's take 15 to 20 minutes or however long the conversation kind of rolls to discuss anything from participants that was brought up there, or maybe you have more queries about things you'd like to know from Sabelo. And then in the final 10 minutes, we always do a little announcement section for anyone who wants to share, announcements, news, any kind of next steps, and we'll do a wrap up. So with that, I'd like to invite any first questions or queries from the participants on Isabella about anything you might want to know. Otherwise, I know Eric and I have burning questions. So.
Should I start just to open up, or does someone want to jump in?
For sure. And whoever wants to has a question, you can raise your hand, unmute, or just add it in the chat if you're having trouble with your microphone, and I'm happy to read it out.
So we talk quite a bit about, biodiversity plans, right? Sort of, and how that's also linked, the climate action plans and those kinds of dynamics. But the principal tool for planning, sort of, is the core development plan, like the IDP. Now, you mentioned that you guys have begun to build in, sort of a biodiversity strategy within the development, right? Sort of integrated into that process. I find that to be super important, particularly for smaller municipalities, sort of, and other, sort of local authorities that probably won't be able to finance sort of a separate biodiversity strategy. And a climate action plan, and sort of their development plan. They need to mainstream biodiversity and urban nature into that sort of development plan. It'll be interesting if you can talk a bit about that. And the other question I have is around the kind of the biodiversity planning zones, and the very fact that they're both public and private. Sort of, what are the challenges and opportunities in that, and particularly the challenges? I mean, the idea is that most of the land is, in a lot of cases, a lot of the land is not public; it's private, and we need to build those partnerships. Doing that is actually very important. The fact that you've done it is impressive, and we want to hear a little more about it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for those, Eric. I think, yeah, there's two interesting questions. So I think, I suppose one of the things that I think as a Tugu municipality, I consider us to have what I consider to be a decentralized environmental management function. I think what I mean by that is that our department is primarily focused on just biodiversity. Whereas you've got other departments that deal, for example, like, water quality related issues or environmental health related issues, as well as the waste like, issues, of which some cities are actually have a kind of like a centralized function. But I think in terms of where in us, in kind of like being decentralized, we found ourselves, I think, as a department within our units, which is development planning, environment and management unit. So essentially, we kind of like fitted in within the planning function of the city, in that we were not necessarily like a standalone, like an environmental management department with the different components. And I think for me, the advantages of where we are versus maybe a city or that has like a standalone environmental management function is that those cities will then have to kind of like find a way of actually integrating their plans, towards that kind of land use planning and the like. But whereas for us, we are sitting within that function. And I think one of the things that we've learned over the years, I mentioned earlier in terms of our Planning Act, which is a special planning land use Management Act, which is a SPLUMA. And then one of the components that it requires is that if we are then as a municipality are putting together like our special development frameworks and plans, land use schemes, then we must consider the environmental features. And so we've essentially saw that as an opportunity to then use that to mainstream biodiversity as well as our environmental plan and layer. Also, I think where that advantage is for us is that we then, as a unit, we get all of the land use applications that actually happen in the municipality because we sit within that unit. We are then one of the first departments that actually have to engage with those land use applications in such a way that I think one of the things that SPLUMA requires is that municipalities must have a municipal planning tribunal, of which we are also then kind of represented, that structure where there's environmental resource. So for me, it was really, I think, it's quite important that you got to find, I think, a way of mainstreaming biodiversity and into decision making, and for us through the planning aspects. And that's where I think the value of champions, where then they're kind of like they're the ones that actually have to drive the organization, I think, towards better consideration of environmental issues. That's on your second question, Eric, just around some of the challenges. I think the first time that we introduced the open space plan into our land use scheme was around about the year 2010, where then we undertook like a massive revision, and then we did like a public participation process, which then affected, I think, a lot of the landowners, because now we didn't just have a plan which was sitting outside of the land use scheme. Now we had this plan environmental layer as part of the land use scheme. So we're then challenged just around I think our ability as a municipality to basically do, at that time they considered to be environmental planning, but in that High Court decision, I think that role as for municipalities, the city of Cape Town was one of the friends of the court, in that it was quite affirmed that that when the drafters of the constitution in South Africa, in that when they were talking about planning, and that there's no way that they would have left out environmental issues as well as their features. But I think the key challenges or arguments that were made were was that essentially we were then as a municipality expropriating land, or we're restricting land uses for those different landowners, that we were not giving them incentives just around, if for example 50% of your site is affected by a sensitive environmental feature. So which is why I think we then came up with some of the tools just around some of the rates incentives that do exist as part of the rates policy, where that can be applied. Also why we're also using tools like biodiversity stewardship, where we can then enter into biodiversity agreements with landowners. And so for me, so I think one of the key things that we should be doing, I think, as a biodiversity practitioners, is really just around this advocacy and communication, because I think it's important that people get to really understand and appreciate I think the value that nature actually brings to all of us, I think, as a society. So I think it is still, I'm not saying that the challenge is not overcome, because there are people that do come in and say hey, you guys have you've robbed me of my land, and we have to have gone a journey with them and actually take them through some of those conversations.
Great, thanks, Sabelo. I have a kind of linked question, maybe if I can just jump in terms of the engagement and communication piece. I saw on your one slide there was even a event that you had with women's health and wild harvesting, and I mean, I think that's an amazing kind of event and engagement of a real community about an issue that's really important to them. So just within your department, I guess, like, how do you identify these different events, or how do you create them? Are they kind of coming from the community? Do you work with the
Sure.
community? How do you identify those things to produce them? And like, what has been the kind of success or challenges associated with those?
Right. Yeah, I think say like over the last say 12 to 18 months, I think essentially how I mean it's so I think firstly, yeah, advocacy and communication is part of our strategy goals. As I mentioned earlier, that it might not have been an area that we had put, I suppose, a lot of emphasis as well as a resourcing other than the States of Biodiversity reports, which we do annually, and as well as our quarterly biodiversity forum. So I think for me, with having been in this role now for a couple of years, is also I think it just happened there was an opportunity for us to get an additional resource. And I think with that resource, I think I was quite keen, like, and deliberate about wanting to essentially pilot that for us and to get that essentially like, on the road and what it actually might mean. But I really think the goal really for it, Julie, was really about really, I think, wanting people or needing people to connect with nature. It's kind of like see its value, to see its benefits, not just from a scientific like value like that we're dealing with endangered like species and the like. And so I think for me part of that journey was that we wanted to try that out and to really start to speak to people to what they need, but also I think hearing what people need on the ground, where we can then marry I think our plans I think with that. I think two other things I'd like to mention with that in our journey, because again, I think that's something that we have initiated, but we do need to have a dedicated resource so that it can then help us to have these plans and roll them out, like, going forward. I mean, just a couple of things to mention. We were also within the organization where we are deliberate about profiling our current staff, so that people get to know that there is this function, this is what we do. Also, we did November is like an international men's month, where we invited men within the organization to essentially come and join us on a hike in one of our protected areas. The uptake was around about 20, of which I still think that there is, I think, a big opportunity that if we are also are deliberate, but also are consistent, like in terms of what we wanting to achieve. Where now, other than people like Debra in the past, we're the ones now that have to be those champions and be those drivers of change. I think within our organization.
Thanks so much for sharing. It's a super cool and sounds like a great new experimental initiative as well.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Very cool. Charmaine, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it based on your experience, but just tell me if you can't. Have you had instances where your spatial biodiversity plan, which like in Cape Town, is already mainstreamed into decision making in your spatial development framework and your integrated development plan and that? So, into mainstream city planning. But then when it comes to development applications for land use change, the Municipal Planning Tribunal just ignores it. Have you had similar issues? And if so, what did how did you deal with it? And do you think the problem was a lack of or incorrect information going into the tribunal's decision making, or was it the actual tribunal members themselves either not understanding it or disregarding it? And then, do you have any recommendations of how to overcome that? This was an issue actually raised by our deputy mayor yesterday. So something I'd be keen to sort of get some advice on. Thank you.
Sure. That's the Charmaine, like you never shy away from all the tough questions. So yeah, I I think what at least what we have been able to achieve is that because of where we are, like within the planning function, essentially it is our unit that essentially let's say that holds this Pluma office, which deals with kind of like municipal planning tribunal. So for us in the Turini municipality, we always have an environmental department official. They essentially, I think I've been a member of the municipal planning tribunal in the Turini municipality. It's probably now for about 6 years, if I'm not mistaken. We in fact, so what we did was we insisted, because our planning basically requires that there has to be consideration of environmental issues, that firstly we have a seat on the table as a member of the municipal planning tribunal, but also we duplicated that system where we had a primary member, but also an alternative member, because you may find that I might not be available for a particular municipal planning tribunal, but one of my colleagues, like who might be delegated, and that they will then be able to cover up, at least attend that meeting. Because I think then by us, I think doing that, Charmaine, I think where it actually helped is that we always ensure that the environment has a voice. We are the MPT's environmental management specialist, if I can put it that way. The so I think for me, like even if the quality of information might not be there, but at least someone will be at that level to essentially translate it. If the environmental information that's coming through is clear, is good, then what you tend to find, at least what I found in practice, is that even some of the other municipal planning tribunal members, where they also start on picking on sustainability, like environmental issues, before sometimes we even raise a particular issue, that kind of when we are preparing for meetings. So I think for me, if you are able to find a seat on the table, make sure that it's duplicated where you have a member, but also you have an alternative member, because then that's always ensures that the biodiversity information is considered by the planning tribunal, I think, in a way that it should be. There have been times where applications have actually been deferred on the basis of like environmental requirements, where maybe assessments were never done. If I can recall, sometimes where we've had like difficult meetings, it may only have been maybe one application where the municipal planning tribunal kind of like ignored some of the information, but I think a couple of months later on, then some of them actually came back to us to say, you know what, you were correct in basically insisting on some of the environmental requirements to be met. So I think for the city of Cape Town, make sure that you find a way of actually having a seat on the table, but also maybe build a champion around some of the members, just in terms of empowering them with the necessary biodiversity information, especially where you've got where proposals might actually be against some of your priority areas.
Thank you so much. That's incredibly helpful advice, and I definitely will take this back. We currently don't, to my knowledge, have an environmental rep on our municipal planning tribunal. And I think you're right that would go a long way to having better decision making at that top level. Fantastic answer. Thank you.
Sure.
I'd like to welcome anyone else from the audience to ask a question if they have. Otherwise, I have one last one for you, Isabella.
Sure.
Anybody else? Any burning questions? Mine was about you talking about green jobs, or Franz, actually, you
Go ahead, Franz.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Sabelo, for the presentation so far. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how you can use spatial planning to put in place an incredible biodiversity plan. So my question is about the necessity to take in consideration the need of poor people, because sometimes, you know, when you put in place a biodiversity plan and environmental regulation, people in need who want just to have something to eat daily, who don't have a suitable home, some issues, a lot of financial issues daily, don't be aware about the need to preserve, to conserve environment to gain from the ecosystemic service and other assets. So how do you take in consideration the need in your environmental policy? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Franz. Thanks for being here. But also, I think you have another tough question, and just maybe just my reflections are, especially where we apply our biodiversity stewardship policy. I think that there's a specific bias towards kind of like our rural, like areas where I think there's a greater need of the ecosystem services that are being provided. Where I think since about 2017 when we actually adopted the policy, in that we are still working on essentially having, let's say, like a formally signed, let's say, biodiversity agreement. And I think some of the reasons why there may be delays around that. So although you may find that where we are prioritizing biodiversity stewardship is within kind of critical biodiversity areas, it's areas that kind of like deliver like a lot of ecosystem services, just given the rural nature and context of some of those areas. So I think some of the delays are really around, I think trying to understand some of the socio-economic issues within those different communities, because it's quite difficult to then be driving like a biodiversity protection agenda when there are like, those kind of like outstanding socio-economic issues. And I think some of the ways, at least that I think we are trying to deal with those challenges, is that also we realize that it's not only good that we go out there like alone as a department, where sometimes we also need to bring in the other municipal departments and services, because if France doesn't have, let's say, potable water, like on the day, and we driving biodiversity conservation, he's seeing us from the same organization, he's thinking that, listen, but I don't have water. Like, you guys need to be providing me with water. And so we've also just learned to always bring other stakeholders with us, who might then be able to address, I think, some of the issues that are there in those different communities. I think what we do is, before, sometimes we plan workshops, especially in some of those communities, is that we do kind of like a needs like analysis to firstly understand where are some of the key issues, so that when we are having like formal workshops, we can then have partner departments or sisters who can then be able to address some of the issues that might be prevalent in those communities. The second part of it is we have initiated essentially like, I suppose it's a study or external services for essentially helping us to put together like a feasibility like plan for some of our priority stewardship areas, just so that we need other expertise other than the technical, ecological, that understanding, to see where might be that socio-economic opportunities or challenges that might exist in a specific community, so that we can then, through basically where we have priority areas, how we can then make sure that some of those issues are actually addressed. So for me, yeah, that is a start of a journey for us, so that we are then able to, I think to better understand some of those challenges and how we can then address them, while at the same time also addressing biodiversity issues. So yeah, it's just those two examples, just in terms of how we are trying, I think, maybe to make better inroads. I'm hoping that that at least soon, if we are able to address some of those aspects, that we might actually be able to have formal biodiversity agreement with some of the communities that we work within.
Thank you for the response.
Thanks for your question.
And I guess I'll just jump on, kind of related on the socioeconomic issue. I was intrigued by your
Yes.
comment on the green jobs, and yeah, just what kinds of positions have you prioritized and been able to offer? How has those kind of been met? And then how do you raise funds to be able to pay for these jobs, or how is that generated? I know other cities might be wondering how you do that.
Yeah, I suppose the easier one. Yeah. So currently we are making use of like internal budgets, where at least again, I think it's about having those champions to make sure that we change even like our budgeting system, like the budget line items, where at least we have been able to add in, for example, like a reforestation line item in the organization's budget. And then some of those initiatives that we do around reforestation, where that comes out of that, but also just around invasive alien species management, where we've created budget line items. So all of that, at least the organization is now, again, through the work of our champions in the past, we have been able to have those as part of our financial system. So currently the organization is providing us with some internal resources, but also we do realize that that in itself is not, I suppose, at some point in time, if politically the kind of things change, and that there might be different priorities. I mean, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, where you may find that some of the budget for implementation, and that it went towards other required services, or maybe when we had floods, they like not going towards having to repair things like infrastructure and the services and the like. So it's always a risk. And I think one of the other things that in addition to that advocacy and communication, is also wanting to, I think, to learn a bit more just around how we can tap into other opportunities that might be out there. I think yesterday I was in an ICLI meeting that was talking about things like green bonds, things like carbon bonds. So it's a space that we are wanting to really, I think, to learn and to understand how we can then take our own investment that we've made over the last couple of years to address some of those funding gaps, because they are that's just a simple reality. I think over the years we have acquired, I think, about 780 hectares of land, for biodiversity conservation and management. And so what do we then do with that asset? Can it actually help us to raise and to generate funds in in a way that can then plow and redeploy towards some of our work. It's sort of those are sort of things that myself together with the team and the department, that those are some of the areas that we are really wanting to, I think just to take forward for ourselves. As in terms of some of the jobs, it's really mainly around invasive alien plant clearing. So it's kind of like field workers that are essentially employed as part of the program. Doesn't require I think sometimes doesn't even require like a matric. But I think some of the good things out of it is that there's quite a strong element around capacity building, training, like being able to identify invasive alien species, why we have to deal with them, for our high altitude teams, just upskilling them in terms of rope access, where people are then able to work elsewhere. But I think also the last one, so yeah, training, but also where we set up things like a small to medium enterprises, where we encourage some of the cohorts actually to then establish their own businesses, who then at a later stage can then consult, will be contracted as part of our bigger implementation programs.
Cool. Thanks so much for that insight. That's really interesting, like the pipeline and the skills building, and then the SMEs. That's really fantastic.
And the focus, sort of on how to raise revenue around your natural assets, right?
Yes.
funnels back into, sort of the kind of funding that's necessary for adaptation, right? This is really, really important. Rowan.
Yeah.
Just a quick point. Cape Town has done a green bond in the past. And Sabella, we're happy to chat to you about that. But I think it would be interesting just from a point of view of one of the main people who actually drove it, who is now a director of grants. And his comment was that the city of Cape Town probably won't pursue a green bond again. And the reason is simple. For one, you don't need something that is a green bond per se. Rather, he would pursue the option that all bonds include green aspects. In other words, every funding requirement, every project that goes out must include green. So don't make it standalone. It makes it seem to be different. Rather try and build it into everything else. So that's just one point. The other is they are horribly complicated to manage. And he says the end result, it was good. It was very oversubscribed, but the amount of effort and the fact that it didn't quite fit as expected into the rest of the city's budgeting systems, it was not quite what they would have wanted. But you're most welcome. If you contact Charmaine, I'm sure she can put you in contact with Daniel Sullivan. Have a chat to him, see what did work, what didn't work. But I think it's just worth noting that, it's not necessarily, it sounds great, but it's not necessarily the right solution. Not to say that you can't make it work, you probably can, but it is something to look into. And then I'm going to be nasty and point out, Jonathan, don't you want to talk about some of the EPWP stuff and some of the capacity building in terms of green jobs, since it was your previous post? And I'll get shot later.
Okay, Jonathan, you've been called out. Let's hear from you, please, brother.
Hi, everybody. How you guys doing?
Good.
Well, thanks.
Good. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And we have quite an extensive green jobs unit. Sits within the invasive species unit, which is under the biodiversity management branch, the same sort of branch that Charmaine and I sit in. And we use a lot of green funding to create opportunities for semi-skilled communities at risk. So those previously disadvantaged communities. And I'll primarily use it for alien clearing and rehabilitation within our protected area network and conservation areas, but also on other city-owned sites as well. Yeah, we generate significant person day opportunities and spend upwards, I think this year, the budget's around 20 million Rand for green jobs and alien clearing and restoration rehabilitation. It used to be far more than that, but we're currently having a couple of budget cuts. And we generally try to follow that very similar sort of EPWP NRM program. We do some really good work with it. And
excellent. Hey, Jonathan, was this somehow connected to the water fund process in Cape Town?
We work closely with the water fund. They have a different costing model and mechanism, but we do try and sort of edge match our clearing initiatives with theirs in the upper catchments. So Vemershuk and Steenbras nature reserves, because their priority is water balance, where we use the green jobs funding for a variety of ecosystem services, including fire, as well as safety and security within the urban area. We do try edge match. We work closely with them, and our sites that are located in the upper water catchments, we do then provide. We consolidate our data with this into their decision support system. So, and then I think the city also funds the Greater Cape Town Water Fund. They give I think a significant amount of their budget comes from bulk water for water balance projects in the upper catchments.
Well, thanks.
Any queries on that?
Yeah, may I just ask, maybe Jonathan, just in terms of, some of the green funding, just whether, is that also internally, are those internal budgets, or if you guys are looking to other funding sources?
Currently, it's all internal budgets
Yeah,
through
no,
our
right.
a small funding. We used to get quite a bit of funding from NRM, but we've since moved away from the NRM funding scheme. We do
Right.
utilize the EPWP rate, but we top those
Yes.
up so they're slightly higher than the standard EPWP rate as well. So it's all internal funding. And we source from biodiversity, we source a lot of our funding from our line departments because we also implement, contract, and manage alien clearing and rehabilitation
Okay.
services
Okay.
on their properties as well. So it's not just biodiversity sites, it's if housing sites that are undeveloped in terms of compliance with the legislation. So other line departments provide significant funding as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, all internal
So
funding.
I have a question,
Yeah.
if I may. So it's comment in the question altogether. First of all, I think we need to explore this a little more. Yeah. Maybe in one session, and have some voices around this. I come out of, some work out of the city of Freetown where we focus our natural assets, sort of around attracting private investment, right? So the green bond dynamic, I think that's a more older securitized route. We are more looking toward, sort of the carbon market and the private market, right? In terms of being able to get long-term investment in natural assets. Whether it's restoration, whether it is conservation of existing areas. We're now looking really at blue carbon, those kinds of dynamics around mangrove areas and that kind of thing, but also, sort of urban forest assets, which is possible, which is something that is possible in a city like Nairobi and also possibly also in Durban, right? And so a lot of the work that you guys are doing, Jonathan, there is a way, to look at either through biodiversity credits, or other kinds of dynamics to be able to bring this community and biodiversity and climate dynamic into, sort of a evaluation process that can be taken into the market somehow and access either through, sort of an SCR linked to the carbon market or sort of voluntary carbon market dynamic to get sort of investment resources in the long run to create a multiple, of the green jobs that are being created currently, right? And create a circularity around, sort of biodiversity, conservation. This is something that I think we should explore, no?
Yeah, I think a practical municipal biodiversity finance session could be really interesting, especially like as Bronwyn says, if they've done green bonds and had some wins but challenges, it would be great to hear from cities about the actual practicalities of these and the kind of advantages, disadvantages. I know, Eric, you've done stuff with Freetown as well, so I think that might be a great session to have this year.
Yeah.
And a lot of interest, yeah.
Probably very soon.
We'll get our old friends all coming back.
Exactly, right?
Just in keeping with time, we've gone a little bit over. I'd like to invite if anyone has any additional announcements or things they'd like to share. Otherwise, we can round down and we'll see you next month. I see a thumbs up from Katim. Is that a question or an announcement? Feel free to chime in, or just an acknowledgement. That's fine too.
Okay,
Go ahead.
fantastic. Thanks very much, all of you. I hope you're hearing me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm actually accessing the meeting both from my mobile phone and my laptop. So just to give me more flexibility and also enable me to crank up the volume on my external speakers. But anyway, I just want to say this is like my first meeting that I've attended in person or otherwise with the IUCN. And I'm glad I made the meeting. It's been a very eye-opening meeting for sure. And because of that, I'm just wondering, just the presentation that I saw from Sabelo, I'm just wondering, like, we are like years and years and decades behind here in the Gambia, in terms of looking at, biodiversity issues and nature conservation and stuff. I mean, I'm just blown away by how methodical, you people are going about it. And of course, also deploying the full a suite of technologies and tools that you have to basically manage your resources, which I say, as the Americans say, I'll say kudos to you. And my question is, and I have to predicate that with my excitement that Eric is actually also in part based in Freetown, because I was beginning to think like this is a meeting of all the participants basically were from Southern Africa, if not from South Africa itself. And what I'd like to know is if there has been any, programs where you share your knowledge and experience with those of us in other African countries that are just about maybe grappling with some of these things. Because I think, in development parlance, they always talk about South-South cooperation. I think this is like a prime candidate to do that. And I forgot to mention that I'm an international development consultant doing consulting assignments for UN and government agencies, as well as NGOs in Africa, various countries in East, West, Central, and Southern Africa. Been doing that for the past 22 years. And recently, like about a year or so ago, I joined some IUCN commissions. Basically, three of them. I'm now on three of them. One is the Commission on Environmental Management, and the other one is the Commission on Climate Change, the Climate Change Commission. And then the last one is Commission on Environmental, Economic, and Social Policy. But I have to admit that I am reticent to tell people that I'm on the IUCN commissions, because I really have been like very challenged as to how to get myself involved in some of the activities of these commissions and the working groups. So because I'm more familiar with having like email discussion lists where people are in almost constant contact, and you get to know what's going on. I do get newsletters and emails from the IUCN, but I think that's like a bit different from at least what I know from engagement with smaller groups and things like that. And I was just wondering if the Africa what's it called again, subgroup or whatever it is, has like an email list where people can engage, without actually having to log into the discussion board and things like that. In other words, what I'm really looking for is how can I, as somebody who's like basically trying to find my feet in the IUCN community, be able to be better engaged with what's going on, of course, also with the people that are engaged with the work that they're doing. By way of a background, I'm a soil scientist by training. But like I said, as an international development consultant for all these years, I've been involved in many, many aspects of development work, writing project documents, project evaluations, conducting project evaluations, and all those things. So, yeah, I really would like to hear from you offline if necessary. Like send me an email, or send me a WhatsApp message as to what really I can do to get really involved, at least as much as I possibly can. Again, thank you very much for a fantastic meeting. I'm really hoping and looking forward to more of these, and hopefully meeting all of you, if not some of you, in some of these meetings in person, in the near future. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Katim. Can I just quickly say, we'll contact you offline, but welcome, to the Urban Ecosystems, Specialist Working Group. We are attached to the Commission on Ecosystem Management. So what we want to do is get you as a member of CEM, and one of the ways to get into the IUCN family and subculture is through this meeting. We have this meeting every month. We come together. We like to do it in person, but we also do have a mailing list and the rest, and we can talk about that in detail. And we welcome you here, and we would like for you to continue with us. I think we're going to have an interesting journey throughout the year. We meet once a month to do an urban, cities and nature brief. And next month we're going to take it to West Africa. where most likely we'll have a city in West Africa. I'm not prepared to say which one yet, but for the most part, we've been sort of looking at one of the cities in Cameroon, and it looks like that will be the city that we'll brief next time. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
and we've
fantastic. Thank
definitely
you so
had.
much.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, continue.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much to Eric. Yeah, thanks. I think that was Eric talking.
Yes.
And just to echo, like, these are some conversations that we've had in our previous meetings about how to do engagement within this group, and we're thinking about how to continue to shape that going forward. Of course, we'll have the monthly briefings, but many people have said it might be interesting to have other ways to engage and continue these kind of dialogues in a more sustained way. So I think we're moving kind of at a speed of trust and creativity and figuring out what that could be, but that's a further conversation we can take throughout the year if people are interested further. So let's see where it goes. And I see we have two hands, again, trying to keep in mind time, but I think it's Charmaine and then Vivian.
Thank you. It actually my question or my promo flows really nicely after Katim's request for more engagement. So this is a sort of a promotional heads up that in 2 weeks' time, City of Cape Town will be publishing for public comment our city policy update to, well, it's a city policy where our spatial biodiversity plan is adopted as city policy. It used to be called the Bioregional Plan, and it's now going to be the Cape Town Biodiversity Spatial Plan 2025. So as soon as those adverts go out, I'll send them through to Julie and Eric, if you don't mind, and then you can circulate it to this network. And It would be fabulous to have input on our policy about spatial planning for biodiversity from the rest of Africa. The more positive feedback we get and the more advice we can get from other cities, it'll only make it a better product. So thank you. I'll be in touch.
Yeah, we can definitely share that round for sure. Sure, thanks. And then I have a hand from Gibeon from.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the floor. As Katim, it is my first time to participate to this meeting. I get in touch with urban ecosystem in Cali. I was there for the COP16.
Okay.
Oh, yes. I put my address, my email address there, and later I received email. But when I came back, there was a lot of things, but I think that the idea is very interesting. And here in Burkina Faso, we have a fight, we call it in French, Barcouf. It is a fight for reinforcing the cover, vegetation cover in the country.
Yeah.
So in the city, and we want to change the thing because we have more building, less green area. So we want to increase the green area, and the concept of urban ecosystem is very, very interesting. And we are in a step where it would be interesting to include biodiversity in this concept. So I'm here more for learning and to see also if I can have for learning from experience, and also to see if there is some opportunity to have some support, technical support, or if you can apply also for some fund for that. That could be interesting. So not so many questions, but if you have some document to share with me, I'm ready to read to better know and to see how in Burkina Faso we can also contribute to urban ecosystem.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you. Okay, so Julie, if I can Sabelo, do you want to say something before we wrap up? Go ahead.
No, I'd say thank you for the invitation. And for I think for the engagement, and certainly I would reach out to the necessary people even offline. Thank you.
This has been fantastic. I just wanted to say two quick things. So there is a important conference that's going to be happening over a couple of days in August. We'll send it out as a part of the email after this. It's going to be based at WITS. It's the Earth System Governance conference. And I will be there presenting, and we'll be looking specifically at sort of how do you build out sort of how do you actually sort of fund your natural capital, and looking at the Freetown experience and that kind of dynamic. There are a number of sessions, and the application to actually present, to do kind of a rapid speed talk, or to do a sort of a technical workshop, right? Is the application is due in, I think, at the end of this week. So take a look. I mean, I think sort of Cape Town and Durban certainly should sort of take that opportunity to present what you're doing in terms of your biodiversity spatial planning. That could be interesting, even if you sort of did it together. And also just for the cities, also at the end of this week, the window is closing for the African Development Bank. They have a climate window that's open, that's going to close at the end of this week, where there would be an opportunity to do, to expand some of the work that you're doing on biodiversity planning. So you might want to take a look at it. We're going to put both of those in the newsletter that we're going to be sending out in the next day or so. Yeah.
Do you know if there's an option for virtual participation, Eric, for that particular conference?
I'm thinking that it's in person, and there's even a piece of it they're doing like for young researchers, where they're doing it like up in what is this, in the park?
In Kruger.
In Kruger,
or something.
Right? But then they're doing the actual workshop at WITS.
Okay.
It's quite exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. I just always ask because I know many of us from different parts of the continent, like, it's hard to get funding to travel. So
exactly. Right. Yeah, but we're going to keep our eye out on, there are a number of these coming up over the year. Yeah. Including the community-based adaptation, sort of meeting that it's been in Africa for a while. It was in Asia recently. It was in Tanzania this last time. This time is the first time it's going to be held in Latin America. And there's always ways to get some funding to get to this. And it's an important way to also talk about biodiversity, and an important place to talk about it and to bridge it with equity issues. So we'll keep those sort of on our list, and give folks enough time to figure out how to get funding and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Eclairs Rise Festival, which is quite a dynamic thing, is happening, I think, in Cape Town in May. So for the South African folks, that's pretty accessible, but I think there's also virtual participation. So we can put these opportunities in the upcoming newsletter so people can have a look.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, Brian said it's the end of May. Okay, great. I got that one right. Does anyone have anything? Oh, shame. She says only in person. All right, well, let's see. Does anyone else have any announcements before we close? And thanks for sticking with us so long. It was a great conversation. So I think that betrays how much interest there actually was. So.
Exactly. All right, so you know what?
Yeah, Julie, just to communicate about two events quickly. Who may be interested. Some people. The first event is organized by Naturescape. Naturescape organized his second meeting, focused on citizen science. They will introduce the way of the project thinks about the role of cities in nature-based solutions and its link to transformative change, including how it can help us address climate change, biodiversity loss, and social justice. So I will put the link to attend the event online quickly. I will put it in the chat.
And we'll also include it in the newsletter. So
Okay.
it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great, thanks.
Yeah. Then there is also another online meeting organized by Global Cities Hub. The name is Multilateralism and Cities in 2025. What's Waste? Plastics, pandemics, forum and mayor, and other global issues. I think it's today. The meeting will be today. So if somebody would like to attend the meeting, kindly follow this link. Yeah. So it's all about. Thank you.
Excellent. Can I just please ask before we go that, we turn on our cameras one more time so that we can take we took an opening picture. Let's just take a, sort of a farewell picture. Because we
Eric
got
loves the picture. Here we go. I think it's fantastic.
Come on, guys, let's turn on our cameras. Turn on our cameras, turn on our cameras.
We're looking good at, for multiple times, 2 p.m. in South Africa here.
Give me a second, please. I'm trying to.
I'm gonna just try one more time. Hold on 1 second, 1 second. All right, here we go, here we go. That is excellent. Yay, thank you. This has been great.
And thanks so much for everyone joining today. We have so many colleagues from different places, Gambia, Namibia, Burkina Faso. So thank you all for attending. I think it was a really fruitful discussion, and we look forward to more this year and to expanding the reach, from different cities across the continent. So thank you all for being here and helping to grow this community.
Thank you so much. Okay, guys. See you next time.
See you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.